Evening in Byzantium by Irwin continued. By the end of the meal, Craig was certain that, politics or no politics, it would be disastrous for Bayard Patty if his daughter married him, but he didn't think he had to tell the boy that. By the time they had had their coffee, it was still too early to go to the Hennessy party, which wouldn't begin until around midnight, and Craig wasn't sure that he wanted to go to the party, or that Patty would be at ease there. "How old are you?" he asked, as they went out of the restaurant toward the car. Patty had insisted on paying for the dinner. "Over 21? "Just," Patty said. "Why? Have you got your passport with you?" "What do you want me to do?" Patty asked in a flare of belligerence. "Prove it to you?" Craig laughed. "Of course not. I thought we might take in the casino. You ought to see some of the sights anyway, as long as you're here. And you need your passport to get in." At the gambling tables, he would be spared the boy's dejected confidences for an hour or two. "Oh, I'm sorry," Patty said. "Sure, I have it in my pocket. Would you like to go?" "What have I got to lose?" "Money," Craig said. "That's all." In the casino, Craig explained briefly about roulette and put Patty next to a croupier to help him out. He himself sat down at a chemin de fer table. He had only played the one time since coming to Cannes, the night he had loaned Wadley the $300, the night Murphy had told him to forget the idea of putting on the Three Horizons. He chuckled to himself, remembering Murphy on the phone. As he sat down at the table, he thought comfortably, "I'm 30,000 francs ahead. I can afford to fool around." From time to time, when they were making up a new shoe at his table, Craig went over to where Patty was playing. There was a sizable pile of chips in front of Patty, and an intent and fascinated glint in his eyes. I have introduced him to a new vice, Craig thought. But at least, putting his money on the numbers and on the red or black, he wasn't mooning about Anne. A place fell vacant at his table opposite his, and a woman sat down at it. She was a buxom woman in a bare-shouldered white silk dress that left a good deal of craftily engineered bosom showing. Her hair was marvelously set, and there was a considerable amount of heavy eyeshadow. Thin, incongruous lips in the round, lacquered face were filled out dramatically in gleaming red. The deeply tanned skin of shoulders and bosom shone as though it had been oiled. Her fingers, armed with long, curved crimson nails, were heavy with diamonds, which Craig, who was not expert at such matters, took for authentic. She had carried a pile of big chips from another table and placed them geometrically in front of her, tapping possessively on them with the long, painted fingertips. She looked across at him and smiled cunningly, without warmth. Now he recognized her. It was the plump woman who had been sunning herself when he and Murphy had passed on the way to the bar at the Hotel du Cap. He remembered the sweaty makeup, the naked, spoiled expression, the marks on the ill-tempered, self-loving face. He had thought of grossness, devouring lust, the other side of the sensual coin. He was sorry she had come to the table. He was sure she would win. She did. After a few hands, he got up from the table, carrying his winnings. The pile of chips in front of Patty had grown somewhat, and Patty was hunched over the table in deep concentration on the spinning wheel. "I've had it, Bayard," Craig said. "I'm cashing in. How about you?" Patty seemed to come back from a long distance as he turned at the sound of Craig's voice. Yeah, he said. "I might as well quit while I'm ahead." At the cashier's desk, Craig saw that Patty had won a little over 1,000 francs. "How much is that in dollars?" Patty asked. "About 250. "What do you know?" Patty said wonderingly. "As easy as that." "Well, like they say, lucky in love." "Oh, come on now, Bayard," Craig said. "Anyway," the boy said, "it helps pay for the trip." He folded the bills neatly and put them into an ostrich skin wallet with gold corners. He stared mournfully at the wallet. "Anne gave this to me," he said, "in better days. It has my initials on it." They walked back to the hotel. They were solicited several times by whores. "Disgusting," Patty said, "open like that." He said he didn't want to go to the Hennessy party. "You know as well as I do, Mr. Craig," he said, "parties like that aren't for me." He went into the lobby of the hotel with Craig, just in case there was a message from Anne. There was no message. "If I hear anything before I leave, I'll let you know," Craig said. He felt uneasy in the boy's presence, as though he were deserting him. "You're a friend," Patty said. "I regard you as a real friend, Mr. Craig." Craig watched the enormous form of his daughter's lover limp forlornly out into the night through the lobby doors. "I have done my duty as a father," Craig thought, as the boy disappeared, "or part of my duty." The door to Hennessy's apartment was open, and the noise of the party could be heard all the way down the hall. It was the unmistakable noise of success. Hennessy's movie must have been very well received that evening. There was also the equally unmistakable smell of marijuana floating out through the open door. In my day, Craig thought, we just got drunk. Was there what the professors of sociology called a value judgment there? The room was crowded as Craig pushed in. Murray Sloane, the critic from the trade paper, was standing next to a big table ranged with bottles. He was not smoking marijuana. Faithful to an older tradition, he was loading up on free whiskey. On a big couch against the wall on the other side of the room, Gale was sitting next to the hero of the evening. Hennessy was in his shirt sleeves, in suspenders, beaming and rosy and sweating. He was sharing a joint with Gale, who looked remote and cool, beyond the noise and celebration. "How did it go tonight, Murray?" Craig asked Sloane. "As you can see." Sloane waved his glass at the chattering guests. "They slobbered over it. Is that what you're going to write?" "No. I'm going to write that it was full of genial, rough American humor, and that the audience reaction was all that the producers could hope for. It is a candidate for the highest honors." Sloane teetered a little, decorously, and Craig could see that he had done his drinking diligently. "Another thing that I am not going to write is that the money spent on hash tonight would have financed a small-budget pornographic film. Another thing I am not going to write is that if it wasn't for the free liquor, I would never go to another festival. And how are you, my friend? Is there any news of you I ought to put on the telex?" "No," Craig said. "Have you seen Ian Wadley around?" "No," Sloane said. "Old drinking companion, notable by his absence. I heard about his big night with Murphy in the restaurant. He's probably crawled into a hole in the basement and pulled it in after him." "Who told you about that?" Craig asked sharply. "The wind speaks," Sloane said, teetering and smiling. "The mistral mutters." "Have you written anything about it?" Craig asked. "I am not a gossip columnist," Sloane said with dignity, "although others are." "Has there been anything in any of the columns?" "Not that I know of," Sloane said, "but I don't read the columns." "Thanks, Murray." Craig moved away from the critic. He hadn't come to the party to spend his time with Murray Sloane. He made his way across the room toward Gale and Hennessy. Corelli, the Italian actor, was there, sitting boyishly on the floor, showing his teeth with his inevitable two girls. Craig couldn't remember whether he had seen these particular two girls before or not. Corelli was sharing his cigarette with the girls. One of them said, "Pure Marrakesh heaven," as she exhaled. Corelli smiled sweetly up at Craig as Craig nearly stumbled over his outstretched foot. "Join us, Mr. Craig," Corelli said. "Please do join us. You have a simpatico face. Doesn't Mr. Craig have a simpatico face, girls?" "Molto simpatico," said one of the girls. "Excuse me," Craig said, being careful not to step on anyone as he made his way to Hennessy and Gale McKinnon. "Congratulations, Hennessy," he said. "I heard you killed them in there tonight." Hennessy beamed up at him, tried to stand, fell back. "I am immortal tonight," he said. "Move over for the new Cecil B. DeMille. Isn't this a nice party? Booze, hash, and fame, with the compliments of the management." "Hello, Gale," Craig said. "Why, Malcolm Hart, as I live and breathe," Gale said. Craig couldn't tell whether she was drunk or drugged. "What's that? What's that?" Hennessy said querulously. Did I invite anybody else? It's a private joke, Craig said, between Gail and myself. Great girl, this kid, Hennessy said, patting Gail's arm. Drank me drink for drink all night long while my fate was being decided on the Côte d'Azur. Interested in my early life, up from slavery, amateur boxer, truck driver, stuntman, pool hustler, bartender, publicity man. What else was I, dear? Garage mechanic, farmhand. That's it, Hennessy beamed at her. She's got me down pat. Perfect American banality. I'm famous, and she's going to make me famous, aren't you, dear? He passed his cigarette to Gail, and she drew in a long draft, closing her eyes as she did so. This isn't any party for me, Craig thought. Good night, he said, as Gail opened her eyes and slowly let out the sweetish smoke. I just wanted to tell you I'm leaving for New York tomorrow. Traveling man, Gail said, giving the cigarette back to Hennessy. Good night, traveling man. He was awakened by the ringing of the telephone. It seemed to him that he had never been asleep, that he was in the middle of one of those dreams in which you feel you are really awake, but are dreaming that you are asleep. He fumbled for the telephone in the darkness. I knocked and knocked, Gail said, but nothing happened. Her voice sounded as if she, too, were in his dream. What time is it? 3 a.m., she said, and all's well. I'm coming up. No, you're not, he said. I'm floating, Gail said, and I'm horny. Beautifully horny for the touch of my true love's lips. You're stoned, he said. She giggled. Beautifully stoned. Beautifully horny. Leave the door open. Go home and go to bed, he said. I have a joint with me. The most beautiful Moroccan kif. Leave the door open for me. We'll drift away together into the most beautiful Moroccan heaven. He hesitated. He was fully awake now. The familiar, dreamy, caressing voice troubled him, traveled insinuatingly along the electric circuits of his nerves. Gail giggled again. You're crumbling, she said. My true love is crumbling. I'm on my way up. There was the click of the telephone. He thought for a moment, remembering what it had been like to make love to her. Young girl's skin, the soft, bold hands. It would be the first and last time he would ever know what the rest of the world seemed to know about drugs. Whatever else Gail was at the moment, she was certainly happy. If he was to share that secret and delicious happiness for an hour or two, who would be the loser? He was going to be on another continent in 20 hours. He would never see her again. Another ordered life was to begin for him tomorrow. He had one last night to enjoy the pleasures of chaos. He knew that if he kept the door closed, there would be no sleep for him that night. He got out of bed and went to the door, unlatched it. He was naked, and he stretched out on top of the bed sheets and waited. He heard the door open, close, heard her come into the room. Shh, shh, my true love, she whispered. He lay still, heard her undress in the darkness, saw her face briefly in the flare of the match as she lit up. She came over to the bed, got in beside him without touching him, moved a pillow, sat up cross-legged, propped against it, the pinpoint of light glowing and getting larger as she pulled at the beautiful Moroccan kif. She handed him the cigarette. Keep it down as long as you can, she said in her dreamy, remote voice. He had given up smoking from one day to the next more than 10 years ago, but he remembered how to inhale. Beautiful, she whispered. Beautiful boy. What was your mother's name? He asked. He had to ask quickly before the smoke began to take effect. Even the first lungful was already at work. She giggled. Full fathom 5, my mother lies, she said. She reached for the cigarette, touched his hand. He felt as though his body was being swept by a soft, warm wind. It was too late for questions. They finished the joint slowly, alternating it from hand to hand. The room was misty with smoke. The sound from the sea outside was musical, a rhythmic, soothing resonance, an organ in a cathedral. She slid down beside him, touched him. They made love timelessly, tracklessly. She was all the girls, all the women of that southern coast, the plump, lustful woman stretched out on her belly in the sun with her legs apart, the blonde young mother at the pool, all of Corelli's bread-brown, bread-warm girls, Natalie Sorrell, white-bosomed and dancing, Constance spelling my rag. After they did not sleep nor talk. They lay side by side in what seemed like an endless, perfect trance. But when the first light of dawn slanted in through the shutters, Gail stirred. "I must go now," she said. Her voice was almost normal. If he had had to speak, his voice would come from miles away. It made no difference to him whether she went or stayed, whether anyone went or stayed. Through a haze he watched her dress, her party dress. She leaned over him, kissed him. "Sleep," she said. "Sleep, my true love." And she was gone. He knew he had a question to ask her, but he didn't know what the question was. Chapter 16. He was almost finished with his packing. He moved with a minimum of luggage, and he could pack for anywhere in a quarter of an hour. He had a call in for Paris, but the operator had reported that all lines were busy. He had told her to keep trying. When the phone rang, he picked it up without enthusiasm. He didn't relish having to explain to Constance that he wasn't going to take her to lunch on Monday after all. But it wasn't Constance. It was Bayard Patty speaking in a voice that sounded as though someone had him by the throat. "I'm in the lobby, Mr. Craig," Patty said, "and I have to see you." "I'm in the middle of packing, and I tell you I have to see you," Patty said in that strangling voice. "I've heard from Anne." "Come on up," Craig said, and told him the number of his apartment. When Patty came into the room, he looked wild, his hair and beard disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed as though he hadn't slept in days. "Your daughter," he said accusingly. "Do you know what she's done? She's run off with that fat old drunken writer, Ian Wadley." "Wait a minute," Craig said. He sat down. It was an automatic reaction, an attempt to preserve at least the appearance of reasonableness and convention. "It can't be. It's impossible." "You say it's impossible." Patty stood over him, his hands working convulsively. "You didn't talk to her." "Where did she call from?" "I asked her. She wouldn't tell me. All she said was she was through with me, for me to forget her. She was with another man. That fat old drunken—" "Hold on a second." Craig stood up and went over to the phone. "Who are you phoning?" Craig asked the operator for Wadley's hotel. "Calm down, Bayard," he said, while waiting for the call to be put through. "Calm down, you say? You're her father. Are you calm?" Patty strode over and stood close to him as though he didn't trust any message that Craig might give or receive, and wanted to hear everything that was said with his own ears. When the operator at Wadley's hotel answered, Craig said, "Monsieur Wadley, s'il vous plaît." "Monsieur Wadley n'est pas là," the operator said. "What's she saying?" Patty asked loudly. Craig waved to him to be quiet. "Vous êtes sûre, madame?" "Oui, oui," the operator said impatiently. "Il est parti." "Parti ou sorti, madame?" "Parti, parti," the operator said, her voice rising. "Il est parti hier matin." "A-t-il laissé une adresse?" "Non, monsieur, non, rien, rien." By now the woman was shouting. The festival was abrasive for hotel operators' nerves. The line went dead. "What was all that about?" Patty demanded. Craig took a deep breath. "Wadley checked out yesterday morning. He didn't leave any forwarding address. There's your French lesson for the day." "Now what are you going to do?" Patty demanded. He looked as though he was going to hit something. Probably me, Craig thought. "I'm going to finish packing my bags," he said, "and I'm going to pay my bill, and I'm going to drive to the airport, and I'm going to take a plane for New York." "You're not going to look for her?" Patty asked incredulously. "No." "What kind of father are you, anyway?" "I guess I'm the kind of father it's necessary to be these days," Craig said. "If I was her father, I'd track him down and kill the bastard with my bare hands," Patty said. "I guess we have different notions about fatherhood, Bayard," Craig said. "It's your fault, Mr. Craig," Patty said bitterly. "You corrupted her. The life you live, throwing money around as though it grew on trees, running after young girls. Don't think I don't know about that Gail McKinnon chick. That's enough of that, Bayard, Craig said. I know I can't throw you out of here personally, but I can get the police to do it for me. And even a very small French policeman can make things very uncomfortable for a very large young American. You don't have to threaten me, Mr. Craig. I'm going. Don't worry about that. I'm disgusted with you and your daughter. He started to leave, then wheeled around. I just want to ask you one question. Are you happy she's gone off with that old fart? No, Craig said. I'm not happy. Not at all happy. At the moment, he didn't think it was necessary to remind Patty that Ian Wadley was quite a few years younger than Jessie Craig. And I'm sorry for you, Bayard. I really am. And I think the best thing for you to do is take Anne's advice and forget about her. Forget about her. Patty shook his head sorrowfully. That's easy to say. Forget about her. I'm not going to be able to do it, Mr. Craig. I know myself. I just won't be able. I don't know if I'll be able to live without her. His face contorted, and he was shaken by an enormous sob. How do you like that? He said in a small voice. I'm crying. He almost ran out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Craig passed his hand wearily over his eyes. He had looked at himself closely while shaving, and he knew that he didn't look much better than Patty this morning. The son of a bitch, he said aloud. The miserable son of a bitch. He was not speaking of Bayard Patty. He went into the bedroom and resumed his packing. His plane would be an hour late in leaving. The man at the check-in counter told him. The man said it graciously, as though he were bestowing a gift on Craig. 60 minutes extra of the civilization of France. Craig went over to the telegraph desk and sent an apologetic telegram to Constance. He was writing out a cable to his secretary in New York, telling her to meet him at Kennedy and get him a hotel reservation, when he heard Gail's voice saying, "Good morning." He bought them by the dozen. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Seeing a friend off," she said, smiling. She took off the sunglasses, twirled them carelessly. She was fresh and clear-eyed. She might just have come from a dip in the sea. She was a perfect advertisement for the benefits of marijuana. "The concierge told me when your plane was leaving," she said. "You don't have much time." The concierge was wrong. The plane's an hour late, Craig said. 1 precious hour. Her tone was mocking. "Good old Air France," she said. "Always time for farewell. Do we get a drink?" "If you want," he said. Leaving was going to be more difficult than he had expected. He fought down the impulse to go over to the check-in counter and reclaim his luggage and tell the man there he had changed his mind about traveling. He gave the cable to the man behind the desk and paid. Carrying a leather envelope with the script of the 3 Horizons in it, and with a raincoat over his arm, he started toward the staircase up to the bar. He was sorry Gail had come. Seeing her there after the scene with Patty eroded the memory of their night together. He walked swiftly, but Gail kept up with him easily. "You look funny," Gail said. "I had an unusual night." "I don't mean that. It's just that I've never seen you with a hat on before." "I only wear a hat when I travel," he said. "It always seems to be raining everywhere when I get off a plane." "I don't like it," she said. "It adds other facets to your character. Disturbing facets. It makes you look more like everybody else." He stopped walking. "I think we said goodbye last night, better than we could possibly do this morning," he said. "I agree," she said calmly. "Ordinarily, I hate fraying away from people in waiting rooms and on train platforms. It's like old, tired rubber bands, stretching and stretching. But this is a special occasion, wouldn't you say so?" "I would say so." They started walking again. They went out to the balcony overlooking the field and sat at a small table. He ordered a bottle of champagne. Just a few days before, he had sat on the same balcony waiting for his daughter to arrive. She had arrived. He remembered the copy of Éducation Sentimentale falling out of the canvas bag. He remembered being annoyed at the unattractive way she was dressed. He sighed. Gail, sitting across from him, did not ask him why he sighed. When the waiter came with the champagne, Gail said, "That should do us for an hour." "I thought you didn't drink until nightfall," he said. "It looks pretty dark out there to me," she said. They drank in silence, looking across the concrete to the blue sea at the field's edge, a ketch heeling over in the wind, all sails taut, foamed through its bow waves on the way toward Italy. "Holiday country," Gail said. "Will you sail away with me?" "Maybe some other time," he said. She nodded. "Some other time. Before I go," he poured himself some more champagne, "you have to answer one question. What was all that about your mother?" "Ah, my mother," Gail said. "I guess you have a right to ask. My mother is a woman of many interests." She twirled the stem of her glass absently and stared out at the white sails beyond the landing strip. She went to art school for a while. She dabbed in pottery. She directed plays for a little theater group. She studied Russian for a year. She took a Yugoslav ballet dancer as a lover for 6 months. One of the things that she wasn't interested in was my father. He had a merchant's soul, she told him. Whatever that is. Another thing she wasn't interested in, it turned out, was me. "She sounds like hundreds of women I've met in the course of my life," Craig said. "What did she have to do with me? I was never a Yugoslav ballet dancer." "May I have some more wine, please?" Gail offered her glass. He filled it. The smooth muscles of her throat moved almost imperceptibly as she lifted her chin. He remembered kissing her throat. "She worked for you once, a long time ago. If I know my mother, you went to bed with her." "Even if I did," he said angrily, "don't make it sound like incest." "Oh, I didn't think of it that way at all," Gail said calmly. "I thought it was just a private joke, between me and me. Don't worry, dear, I'm not your daughter." "It never occurred to me that you were," he said. On the tarmac below, a group of mechanics were working ominously on the undercarriage of the plane that was to fly him to New York. Perhaps he would never leave French soil, or die on it. Gail sat across from him, lounging, aggravatingly at ease. "All right," he said. "What was her name? And when did she work for me?" "Her name was Gloria Talbot. Does that mean anything to you?" He thought hard and then shook his head. "No, I suppose not. She only worked for you for a month or two, when your first play went on. She was just out of college, and she was hanging around the theater, and she got a job in your office doing the scrapbooks, pasting up reviews and publicity stories about you and the people in the play." "Good God, Gail," Craig said. "I must have hired and fired 500 women since then." "I'm sure," she said calmly. "But you seem to have had a special effect on dear old Mums. She just happened never to stop the good work. I don't imagine any of the other 500 ladies got married and then continued to keep a scrapbook with every word written about you and every picture ever printed of you from 1946 to 1964. Jessie Craig to present new play by Edward Brenner this season. Jessie Craig signs one picture deal with Metro. Jessie Craig to be married tomorrow. Photograph of Jessie Craig and his wife leaving for Europe. Jessie Craig to..." "Enough," he said. "I get the idea." He shook his head wonderingly. "What would she want to do that for?" "I never got a chance to ask her. Her loyalties were tangled, perhaps. I only came across all the clippings after she'd run off, when I was 16, with an archaeologist. I get postcards from Turkey, Mexico, places like that. 22 volumes bound in leather, in the attic. She was in such a hurry, she only packed an overnight bag. My father was only away for 2 days, and she had to move fast. I was cleaning out the attic. My father decided he didn't like the house anymore, and we were moving when I came across them. Many's the happy hour I spent after that, rummaging through the history of Jesse Cragg. Gale smiled crookedly. That's how you knew so much about me. That's how. Do you want to know where you spent the summer of 1951? Do you want to know what the New York Times said about you on December 11th, 1959? Ask me. I'll tell you. I'd rather not know, Cragg said. So you took it for granted that I'd had an affair with your mother because of all that. If you knew my mother, Gale said, you'd know it would be natural to take it for granted, especially for a romantic 16-year-old girl sitting in an attic with her mother off in the wilderness someplace with an archaeologist. If you want, I can send you a picture of her to refresh your memory. People say I look like her when she was my age. I don't need any picture, Cragg said. I don't know what sort of life you think I led as a young man. You led an enviable life. I've seen the expression on your face in the photographs. Perhaps. But one of the enviable things about me at that time was that I was in love with the woman I later married, and I believe she was in love with me, and I never looked at anybody else all that time. And no matter what it may seem like to you after this week, I've never been a promiscuous man, and I certainly remember the names of all the ladies I've ever... Will you remember mine in 20 years? Gale asked, smiling. I promise. Good. Now you know why I was so keen on seeing you when I found out you were in Cannes. I'd grown up with you, in a manner of speaking. In a manner of speaking. It was a sentimental reunion. You were a part of my family, also in a manner of speaking. She reached over and poured some champagne for herself. Even if you never touched my mother and never even knew her name, you had some sort of weird, permanent effect on her. She was obviously fascinated with your life, and just as obviously dissatisfied with her own. And in some foolish way, one thing was connected to the other. You can't really blame me if I began to look on you with some disfavor and curiosity. Finally, I knew I had to meet you, somehow. Remember, I was only 16. You're not 16 now. No, I'm not. I'll tell you the truth. I was offended by you. You were too successful. Everything turned out too well for you. You were always in the right places. You were always surrounded by the right people. You lived in a bath of praise. You never seemed to say the wrong thing. As you got older, you never even got fat in your pictures. Newspaper handouts, for God's sake. He gestured impatiently. What could that possibly have to do with reality? That's all I knew about you, remember, she said, until I walked into your room. It was all such an awful contrast with my foolish mother, with her pottery and her Yugoslav, and my father, scraping away at a miserable living in a dingy office in Philadelphia. First, I wanted to see what you were like. Then I wanted to do you as much harm as I could. I made a pretty good start, didn't I? Yes, you did. And now? There was the silvery tinkle of the public address system, and a woman's voice announcing that passengers were to board immediately for the flight to New York. Miraculously, the group of mechanics around the plane had disappeared. Gale reached over and touched the back of his hand lightly. And now I think you'd better go down and get on your plane. He paid, and they walked past the bar and down the steps to the main hall. He stopped as they came up to the passport control booth. Am I going to see you again? He asked. If you come to London. There will be complications, of course. He nodded. Of course. He tried to smile. Next time you write to your mother, he said, give her my regards. I'll do that, she said. She dug in her bag. I have something for you. She pulled out a thick envelope. The concierge gave it to me when I said I was going to see you off. It came just after you left. He took the envelope. He recognized Anne's handwriting. The letter bore a Nice postmark. He looked up at Gale as he stuffed the envelope in his pocket. You know about Anne? Yes, she said. We had a long discussion. Did you try to stop her? No. Why not, for Christ's sake? I was hardly in the position to. I suppose you're right. He put his hands on her arms, pulled her toward him, kissed her briefly. "Goodbye," he said. "Goodbye, my true love," she said. He watched her stride brusquely toward the exit of the terminal, her bag swinging from her shoulder, her long hair streaming brightly behind her, and every man she passed looking hard at her. He saw that she took out the sunglasses and put them on as she approached the door. He felt bruised and old. They were announcing the departure of his plane as he went through the passport gate. He touched the bulk of Anne's letter in his pocket, reading matter for the Atlantic. A decorously dressed tall African with tribal scars and his pretty buxom wife, swathed in gorgeously colored silks, were the only other passengers in first class with him. Craig always felt guilty about paying for first class on airplanes, and always paid. The African and his wife were speaking in a language he couldn't understand. He hoped they spoke no English or French. He didn't want to talk to anyone before he reached New York. The man smiled politely at him. He half smiled in return, a rigidity of the lips, and looked out the window. It was not beyond the bounds of possibility, he thought, that 20 years from now they would meet again, perhaps in the final confrontation between the races, and the man, or his son or daughter, would say, "I remember you. You were the white traveler who refused the smile of friendship offered in the plane at Nice. You are a racist colonial, and I condemn you to die. You were the helpless addition of the accidental and unconsidered moments of your history. Unknowing, you impinged upon the population of your past. Carelessly, you made a joke about a man you had never met. Oblivious of his existence, you took his mistress to dinner. For the rest of his life, he did what he could to harm you. A silly, stage-struck girl wandered into your office and was hired by your secretary, and was a vague, nameless presence in the background for a month or two when you were a young man. More than 20 years later, you suffered, profited from, the consequences of the acts or the non-acts of your early manhood. Nothing was lost, nothing forgotten. The man who had devised the first computer had merely organized the principle of inexorable memory into a circuit of wires and electrical impulses. Unnoticed passers-by noted your orbits, punched their private, indestructible cards. For better or worse, you were on file. The information was stored for eventual use. There was no escape. The process was perpetual. What would Sidney Green say about him among the unpaid-for boiseries in the 16th arrondissement? What would David Teichmann's final instructions be concerning Jesse Craig before he died? How would Natalie Sorrell refer to him in the mansions of Texas? What would be the reaction of Gail McKinnon's daughter upon hearing his name when she was 20? He looked hopefully toward the tall African across the aisle, but the man's face was averted. The engine started up, the demonic howl luxuriously muted by the sound-proofed hull. He took 2 mill towns before the plane started to taxi. If he was going to crash, he was going to crash tranquilly. He waited until after lunch was served before he opened Anne's letter. He knew that whatever she had to say would not improve his appetite. There was no date on the letter and no address, just "Dear Daddy." Dear Daddy put on his glasses. Anne's handwriting was difficult to decipher, and this was worse than ever. It looked as though it had been written while she was running down a steep hill. "Dear Daddy," she wrote, "I'm a coward. I knew you'd disapprove and argue, and I was afraid you'd try to convince me, and afraid you would convince me, so I'm taking the coward's way out. Just forgive me. Just love and forgive me. I'm with Ian. I thought a long time about it." How long was it, he thought? 3 days? 5? Well, perhaps when you're 20 years old, 5 days are a long time to figure out how to waste your life. He didn't remember. "I won't go into the details," she wrote. "I'll just tell you that night in the restaurant, when Ian was treated so horribly by Mr. Murphy, I felt something that I'd never felt for anybody else in my life before. Call it love, I don't care what it's called. I felt it. Don't think it's just hero worship for a writer whose books I admire, and it's no schoolgirl crush. No matter what you may think, I'm past stuff like that. And I'm not looking for a father figure, which I'm sure you would have said if I had stayed to tell you. I have a perfectly good father. Anyway, Ian's only 40, and look at you and Gail McKinnon. I am served, he thought, and well served. He asked the stewardess for a whiskey and soda. It was a letter that needed alcohol. He looked out the window. The valley of the Rhone was hidden by clouds. The clouds looked so solid that you were tempted to believe that you could jump out and swim through them. He sipped at his whiskey when the stewardess gave it to him and went back to the letter. Don't think for a minute, he read, that I'm against anything you've done with Gail. I'm absolutely pro. After what you've gone through with Mummy, I wouldn't blame you if you took up with the bearded lady in the circus. And good God, Gail is one of the best people I've ever met in my whole life. What's more, she told me she was in love with you. I said, of course, everybody's in love with him, and that's almost true. What you're going to do with the lady in Paris is your own business, just like Ian is my own business. I know the arguments. He's too old for me. He's a drunk. He's poor. He's out of fashion. He's not the handsomest man in the world. He's been married 3 times. Craig grinned sourly at the accurate description of the man his daughter was in love with. It's not as though I haven't taken these things into consideration, Anne wrote. I've had long, serious discussions with him about it all. When? Craig wondered. The night he saw her leave the hotel and walk down the beach? On getting out of bed after having offered her convincing proof to Bayard Patty? He felt a pain at the back of his head, thought of aspirin. Before I told him I'd go away with him, Craig read on without aspirin, I laid down conditions. I'm young, but I'm not an idiot. I made him promise to quit drinking, first off, and I made him promise to come back to America, and he's going to keep his promises. He needs someone like me. He needs me. He needs to be esteemed. He's a proud man, and he can't go through life being deriding himself the way he's been doing. How many scenes like that one in the restaurant can a man go through in one lifetime? Oh, my poor daughter, Craig thought. How many women through the ages have ruined themselves under the illusion that they and only they can save a writer, a musician, a painter. The dread hold of art on the imaginations of the female sex. You're different, Anne wrote. You don't need anyone's esteem. You're 20 times stronger than Ian, and I'm asking you to be charitable toward him. In the end, knowing you, I'm sure you will be. Sex is a big tangle anyway, and you should be the first one to admit it. Craig nodded as he read this, but it was one thing to be 48 and come out with a truism like that, another to be 20. I know that I was mean to poor old Bayard, and I suppose he's got to you by now and has been crying on your shoulder. But that was just flesh. Craig squinted at the word, stopped on it. Flesh. It was a strange word for Anne to use. He wondered for a moment if Wadley had helped her write the letter. And flesh isn't enough. The scrawl dashed on. If you've talked to Bayard, you must know that was impossible. Anyway, I never asked him to come to Cannes. If I'd married him, as he kept asking me to do, I nearly screamed he was so insistent. In the long run, I'd have been his victim, and I don't want to be anybody's victim. Someday, Craig thought, I'm going to make up a list for her. 1,000 easy ways to be a victim. Don't be down on poor Ian for our sliding out the way we did. He wanted to stay and tell you what we were doing. I had the hardest time convincing him not to. Not for his sake, but mine. He's in something of a daze for the time being. A happy daze, he says. He thinks I'm something extra special, and he says he fell in love with me that first day on the beach. He says I'm so absolutely different from all the other women he's known, and he says he never dreamed I'd even look at him. He hasn't touched a drink in 2 days, even before we left Cannes. He says it's a world record for him. And I read the part of the book he's working on that he has finished, and it's just wonderful. And if he doesn't drink, it'll be the best thing he's ever done. I'm convinced. And don't worry about money. I'm going to get a job. And with the money from the trust fund, we can get along all right until the book is finished." Craig groaned. The African with the tribal scars looked over at him politely. Craig smiled at the man to reassure him. "I'm sorry if I'm causing you any pain," Anne went on, "but later on I'm sure you'll be happy for me. I'm happy for myself, and you have Gail, although it's more complicated with Gail than you think." "That's what you think," Craig almost talked back aloud to the page. "That's what you think," Craig almost talked back aloud to the page. "There's a long story about her mother," Anne wrote, "that she told me, but I haven't the time to go into now. Anyway, she told me that she was going to explain everything to you. Whatever it is, I'm sure it can't do you any discredit, no matter how it looks on the surface. I really am sure, Daddy. I'm still cowardly enough, even now with Ian at my side, not to tell you where we're going. Just for the moment, I couldn't bear the thought of seeing you and having you disapprove of me in that reasonable, austere way you have. But as soon as we're settled in the States, I'll get in touch with you, and you can come and visit us and see for yourself that all is well. Please love me, Daddy, as I love you. Anne. P.S. Ian sends his best regards." Best regards. Out of consideration for the African couple, Craig refrained from groaning again. He folded the letter neatly and put it in his pocket. It would bear rereading. He thought of Ian Wadley in bed with his daughter. "Miss," he said to the stewardess who was walking down the aisle, "do you have any aspirin?" Chapter 17. Belinda Ewan, his secretary, was waiting for him when he came through customs. He saw that she had not lost her disastrous taste for loud colors in her clothes since he had seen her last. She had been working for him 23 years, and it seemed to him that she had always been the same age. He kissed her on the cheek. She seemed happy to see him. He felt guilty because he hadn't answered her last 2 letters. If a woman has spent 23 years of her life working for you, how do you avoid feeling guilty when you see her? "I have a limousine waiting for us," she said. She knew better than anyone that the money wasn't coming in as it had done for so long, but would have been shocked if he suggested that a taxi would have done just as well. She had a fierce sense of their joint status. She screamed over the phone at agents when she discovered that scripts they had sent to the office had first been offered elsewhere. It was a muggy, oppressive day, and it began to drizzle as they waited for the limousine to be brought round. He touched his hat grimly. The voices of the travelers piling into cars and taxis seemed harsh and angry to him. A child's screaming grated on his nerves. He felt tired, and the aspirin hadn't helped much. Belinda peered at him anxiously, scrutinizing him. "You don't look well, Jessie," she said. He had been so young when he hired her that it had been impossible to ask her to call him Mr. Craig. "At least, I thought you'd have a tan." "I didn't go to Cannes to lie on the beach," he said. The limousine drove up, and he sank gratefully onto the back seat. Standing had been an effort. He was sweating, and he had to mop his face with a handkerchief. "Has it been as warm as this all along?" he asked. "It's not so warm," Belinda said. "Now will you tell me why in the name of heaven you asked me to put you into the Manhattan Hotel on 8th Avenue of all places?" He usually stayed at a quiet, expensive hotel on the East Side, and he could tell that in Belinda's eyes the change represented a demeaning attempt at economy. "I thought it would be more convenient," he said, "to be closer to the office." "You're lucky if you're not mugged every time you go out the front door," Belinda said. "You don't know what 8th Avenue is like these days." She had a sharp, aggressive voice. She had always had a sharp, aggressive voice, and for a while he had toyed with the idea of suggesting to her that she might go to a speech teacher. He had never quite had the courage. Now, of course, it was too late. He didn't tell her he had decided to go to the Manhattan only at the last moment, as he was writing out the cable to her in the Nice airport. The Manhattan was a brassy commercial hotel that he would ordinarily avoid, but he had suddenly remembered that he had lived there while he was putting on Edward Brenner's first play. With Edward Brenner, now no longer writing plays. It had been called the Hotel Lincoln then. Presidents everywhere were being downgraded. He had been lucky at the Hotel Lincoln. He wished he could remember the number of the room, but he couldn't tell any of that to Belinda. She was too sensible a woman to pamper her employer's superstitions. "You certainly didn't give me much warning," she said, aggrieved. "I just got your cable 3 hours ago." "Something came up suddenly," he said. "I'm sorry." "Anyway," she smiled forgivingly. She had sharp little teeth like a puppy's. "Anyway, I'm glad to have you back. The office has been like a morgue. I've been going mad with boredom. I even have taken to keeping a bottle of rum in my desk. I nip at it in the afternoons to keep sane. Don't tell me you finally condescended to go to work again." "In a way," he said. "Hallelujah," she said. "What do you mean, in a way?" "Bruce Thomas wants to do a script I own." "Bruce Thomas," she said, impressed. "Ooh la la." This was the year when everybody spoke the name of Bruce Thomas in a certain tone of voice, he noticed. He didn't know whether he was pleased or jealous. "What script?" Belinda asked suspiciously. "I haven't sent you anything in 3 months." "It's something I found in Europe," he said. "In fact, I wrote it myself." "It's about time," she said. "It's got to be better than the junk we've been getting." "You might have let me know," she said. She was hurt. "You might even have sent me a copy." "Forgive me," he said. He reached over and patted her hand. "Your hand is icy cold," she said. "Are you all right?" "Of course," he said shortly. "When do we start?" she asked. "I'll know better after I see Thomas," he said. "There's no deal yet." He looked out the window of the car at the heavy clouds weighing on the flat landscape. "Oh," he said, "I wanted to ask you something. Do you remember a woman by the name of Gloria Talbot? I think she worked for us." "Just in the beginning, for a couple of months," Belinda said. She remembered everything. "Absolutely incompetent." "Was she pretty?" "I suppose men thought she was pretty. My God, it was nearly 25 years ago. What made you think of her?" "She sent me a message," Craig said, indirectly. "She's probably on her 5th marriage," Belinda said primly. "I spotted the type right off. What did she want?" "It was hard to say. I imagine she just wanted to communicate," he said. Talking somehow was a great effort. "If you don't mind, Belinda," he said, "I'm going to try to nap a little. I'm absolutely bushed." "You travel too much," she said. "You're not a baby anymore." "I guess you might say that." He closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the cushions. His room was on the 26th floor. It was misty outside, and drops of rain slid down the window panes. The towers of the city were glints of glass, dim tears of light in the wispy late-afternoon grayness. The room was hygienic and impersonal, and had not been furnished for Russian nobility. He could hear horns from the Hudson River a few blocks away. There was nothing in the room to remind him of the lucky time with Brenner's play. It occurred to him that he ought to find out where Brenner was buried and lay a flower on the grave. Unpacking was an effort. The light clothes he had worn in Cannes seemed incongruous in the rainy city. There were many people whom he should call, but he decided to put it off to another day. Still, there was one call he had to make, to Bruce Thomas, who was expecting him. He gave Thomas's number to the operator. The brisk, cheerful American voice of the operator was welcome after the shrill, harassed voices of the standardistes of Cannes. Thomas was cordial when he came to the phone. "Well now," he said, "that was a surprise, your writing a script like that. A pleasant surprise." Klein had spoken to him. "I don't know exactly what we can work out, but we'll work out something. Are you busy now? Do you want to come over?" Thomas lived on East 70th Street. The thought of trying to traverse the city was fatiguing. "Let's do it tomorrow, if you don't mind," Craig said. "The jet lag's got me." "Sure," Thomas said. "How about 10 in the morning?" "I'll be there," Craig said. By the way, do you happen to have Ian Wadley's telephone number in London? He could sense Thomas hesitating. You know, Thomas said, I suggested Wadley before I knew you'd written the script. I know, Craig said. Have you talked to him yet? No, Thomas said. Naturally, I wanted to find out what you thought about it. But after Klein told me you didn't mind discussing it, I tried to get in touch with him. He's not in Cannes, and there's no answer at his London address. I've sent him a cable asking him to call me here. Wait a minute, I'll give you his number. When he came back to the phone and gave Craig the number, Thomas said, If you do find him, will you tell him I've been trying to reach him? And would you mind if I sent him a script? I've had some copies Xeroxed. There's no sense in his coming over here if for some reason or another he doesn't want to work on it. I think I heard somewhere that he's planning to come back to the States to live anyway, Craig said. Somewhere. Flying over France, heading toward the English Channel, the brave new world. Dear Daddy. That's interesting, Thomas said. Good for him. See you in the morning. Have a good night. He was a nice man, Thomas, polite, thoughtful, with delicate manners. Craig asked the operator for the London number and lay down on the bed to wait for the call. When he moved his head on the pillow, he felt dizzy, and the room seemed to shift slowly around him. You travel too much, Belinda had said. Wise woman. 23 years in the service. He was terribly thirsty, but he couldn't make himself get up and go into the bathroom for a glass of water. The phone rang, and he sat up, having to move slowly to keep the room from spinning around him. The operator said that there was no answer at the London number, and asked him if he wanted her to try again in an hour. No, he said, cancel the call. He sat on the edge of the bed until the room steadied, then went into the bathroom and drank 2 glasses of water. But he was still thirsty. He was cold now, too, from the air conditioning. He tried to open a window, but it was nailed shut. He looked at his watch. It was 6:30. 12:30 tomorrow morning in Cannes. He had been up a long time, journeyed a great distance. He didn't remember ever having been so thirsty. An ice-cold glass of beer would do wonders for him, maybe 2. The next time he crossed the ocean, he decided he would go by boat. America should be approached cautiously in slow stages. He went downstairs to the grill room, which was decorated with posters from plays. I am in a familiar arena, he thought. He remembered horns, the color of the sand in St. Sebastian. He sat at the bar and ordered a bottle of beer, drank half the first glass in 1 gulp. The ache at the back of his throat subsided. He knew he should eat something, but all he wanted was more beer. He ordered another bottle, treasuring it, drinking slowly. By the end of the 2nd bottle, he felt pleasantly light-headed. The grill room was filling up now, and he balanced the possibility of running into someone he knew and having to talk to him against the joy of 1 more bottle of beer. He decided to take the risk and ordered a 3rd bottle. It was nearly 8 o'clock by the time he got back to his room. He hadn't had to talk to anybody. It was his lucky hotel. He undressed, put on pajamas, got into bed, and turned out the light. He lay there listening to the muted hum of the city far below him. A siren screaming past reminded him that he was in his native city. Ah, he thought regretfully as he slipped off to sleep, there will be no knock on my door tonight. He awoke in pain. His stomach was contracting spasmodically. The bed was soaked in sweat. The pains came and went, sharp and stabbing. Christ, he thought, this must be something like what women go through in childbirth. He had to go to the bathroom. He put on the light, swung his legs carefully over the side of the bed, walked slowly into the bathroom, sat on the toilet. He could feel what seemed like gallons of hot liquid gushing out of him. The pain went down, but he wasn't sure he would be strong enough to get back to bed. When he finally stood up, he had to hold onto the shelf over the basin for support. The liquid in the toilet bowl was black. He pulled the chain. He felt a hot wetness dripping down the inside of his legs. It was blood, blackish red. There was no way in which he could control it. He wrinkled his nose in disgust. He knew he should be afraid, but all he felt was disgust at his body's betrayal. He got a towel and stuffed it up between his legs. Leaving his stained pajama bottoms on the bathroom floor, he made his way back to the bed and dropped on it. He felt weak, but there was no pain. For a moment he thought that he had dreamt it all. He looked at his watch. It was 4:30 in the morning. New York time, he remembered. Zone of blood. It was no hour to wake anyone. If he was still bleeding by 8 o'clock, he would call a doctor. Then he realized that he didn't know the names of any doctors in New York. The penalty of health. He would figure it out in the morning. He put out the light and closed his eyes and tried to sleep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul. Childhood formulas. Anne's psychology professor had seen something in his handwriting. Had he seen this night in New York? Then he fell asleep. He slept without dreaming. He was bone-tired when he awoke, marrow-tired. But there was no more bleeding. It was almost 9 o'clock. There was pale, smog-diluted sunlight outside the window. The city shimmered in a haze of heat. He took the towel out from between his legs. He had obviously bled for a while during his sleep, but by now the blood was caked and dry on the towel. Old, unsolved interior murders. He moved with care, showered for a long time, but did not have the courage to turn the water cold. As he dressed, his body felt broken, as though he had fallen from a great distance. He went downstairs and had breakfast among the tourists and traveling salesmen in the coffee shop. The factory taste of frozen orange juice. No Mediterranean outside the window. No daughter, no mistress across the table, no leer from the waitress. The coffee of his homeland was like dishwater. He made himself eat 2 pieces of toast for strength. No croissants, no brioches. Had he come to the wrong country? He read the New York Times. The casualty count was down in Vietnam. The vice president had made a provocative, alliterative speech. A plane had fallen. He was not the only one who traveled too much. A critic he had never heard of scolded a novelist he had never read. Teams that had not been created when he still went to baseball games had won and lost. A pitcher who was nearly as old as he still made a living throwing the knuckleball. The men and women who had died the day before were people he had not known. Informed now, he faced the day. He went from the world of air conditioning out into the climate of New York. He winced on the sidewalk. Remembering his secretary's warning, he was wary of muggers. If he announced, "I have bled this night," would a Boy Scout find him a taxi? He had no quarter for the doorman, so he gave him a $1 bill. He remembered when doormen were grateful for dimes. Getting into the taxi was like climbing a cliff. He gave the address on East 70th Street. The taxi driver was an old man with a greenish complexion who looked as though he were dying. From the permit on the back of the driver's seat, Craig saw that the man had a Russian name. Did the driver regret that he or his father before him had left Odessa? The taxi inched, spurted, braked, missed other cars by inches on its way across town. Near death, the driver had nothing to lose. 44th Street, going east, was his Indianapolis. He was high in the year's standings for the Grand Prix. If he survived the season, his fortune would be made. Bruce Thomas lived in a brownstone with newly painted window frames. There was a little plaque near the front door that announced that the house was protected by a private patrol service. Craig had been there several times before to big parties. He remembered having enjoyed himself. He had wandered once into Bruce's study on the 2nd floor. The shelves of the study had been laden with statues, plaques, scrolls that Thomas had won for his movies. Craig had won some statues, scrolls, and plaques himself, but he didn't know where they were now. He rang the bell. Thomas opened the door himself, dressed in corduroy slacks and an open-necked polo shirt. He was a neat, graceful, slight man with a warm smile. "Bruce," Craig said as he went into the hallway, "I think you'd better get me a doctor." He sat down on a chair in the hall because he couldn't walk any farther. Chapter 18. He was still alive after 3 days. He was in a bright room in a good hospital, and Bruce Thomas had found him a soft-voiced old doctor who was soothing and taciturn. The chief surgeon of the hospital, a cheerful, round man, kept dropping in as though he just wanted to chat with Craig about the movies and the theater. But Craig knew that he was watching him closely, looking for symptoms that would mean that an emergency operation might be necessary at any moment. When Craig asked him what the chances were after an operation like that, the surgeon said flatly, without hesitation, 50-50. If Craig had had any relatives the doctor could talk to, the doctor would probably have told them instead of the patient. But the only people who had come to his room so far were Thomas and Belinda. He was under light sedation and suffering from no real pain except for the bruised places on his arms where the needles had been placed for 5 transfusions and for the varying intravenous feedings of glucose and salt. For some reason the tubes kept clogging and the needles kept falling out. The veins in his arms had become increasingly difficult to find. And finally the hospital expert, a lovely Scandinavian girl, had been called in to see what she could do. She had cleared the room, even shutting the door on his private day nurse, a tough old ex-captain in the nursing corps, a veteran of Korea. "I can't stand an audience," the expert had said. Talent, in a hospital as elsewhere, Craig saw, had its imperious prerogatives. The Scandinavian girl had pushed and prodded, shaking her neat blonde head, and then, with one deft stroke, had inserted the needle painlessly into a vein on the back of his right hand and adjusted the flow of solution to it. He never saw her again. He was sorry about that. She reminded him of the young Danish mother by the side of the pool in Antibes. 50-50, he marveled, and that's what a man thinks of. The worst thing was the headaches that came after the transfusions. That was normal, he was told. Naturally, in a hospital, pain must seem normal to the people who work there. Thomas had been perfect. He visited the room twice a day, not overdoing his concern. "There's a good chance," he said on the 3rd day, "that you'll be out of here in less than 2 weeks, and then we can get to work." He had not wasted any time. He had secured an okay from United Artists, and they were talking of a budget of $1.5 million for the picture. Thomas had already found a great old mansion in Sands Point where they could shoot on location. He took it for granted that Craig would be the co-producer. If he had heard the surgeon's 50-50 estimate, he gave no hint of it. He was in the room on the 3rd day when the door swung open and Murphy strode in. "What the hell is going on, Jesse?" Murphy asked loudly. "What the hell are you doing here?" Craig said. "I thought you were in Rome." "I'm not in Rome," Murphy said. "Hi, Bruce. Are you two guys fighting already?" "Yes," Thomas said, smiling. "Art is long and ulcers fleeting." Craig was too tired to inquire how Murphy had found out that he was in the hospital, but he was happy to see him there. Murphy would arrange everything. He himself could just drift into his doped and not unpleasant dreams in which night and day blended, pain and pleasure were impersonal abstractions. Knowing that all was now in safe hands, he could concentrate merely on dominating the rebellion of his blood. "They told me I could only stay 5 minutes," Murphy said. "I just wanted to see if you were still alive. Do you want me to fly in my guy from Beverly Hills? He's supposed to be the best in the country." Everything that Murphy touched was the best in the country. "No need, Murph," Craig said. "The men I have here are fine." "Well, you just don't worry about anything but getting better," Murphy said. "By the time you get out of here, I'll have a contract ready for you to sign that'll have United Artists screaming in anguish. Come on, Bruce. We have things to discuss that are not for invalids' ears." Murphy patted Craig's shoulder roughly. "You mustn't scare your old friends like this," he said very gently. "Sonia sends her love." "All right, nurse, all right, I'm going." The ex-captain in the nursing corps was glowering blackly at him and looking dramatically at her watch. The two men went out. The nurse fussed a little with a pillow. "Business," she said, "kills more men than bullets." For a man who has begun his working life in the theater, Craig thought, a hospital room is a fitting place to end it. It is like a stage. The hero is in the center with all the lights upon him. The doctor is the director, although he doubles by playing one of the parts. He watches mostly from the wings, preparing to intervene when necessary, whispering to the other actors that they can go on now, that they must enter smiling, that they are not to prolong their scenes unduly. The nurses, like stagehands, move the props around, hurry on with thermometers, trays, bedpans, syringes, instruments for the taking or infusion of blood. The hero has a long part to play. The work is constructed around him. He never leaves the stage. He has a run-of-the-play contract. Ungratefully, he sometimes grumbles at his prominence, is quick to criticize the manner in which other actors play their scenes with him, would replace them or cut them if he could. The first one he would have eliminated if he could was Belinda Irwin. By the fourth day in the hospital, she had decided that he was going to recover, and that his recovery would be speeded by forcing him to stop brooding, as she described it, and occupy himself with the business of everyday life. She reported that she had checked him out of the hotel and packed his things. His suitcases were now thriftily stored in the office. Mail and messages were to be forwarded. People had been notified. She had called the Times. When he protested weakly about this, she said, firm in her concept of orderly, civilized behavior, that friends and family and the public had a right to know. He refused to ask her what friends and family she had selected. The telephone in the office rang all day. He'd be surprised how many people were interested in him. With her efficiency, it was likely that hundreds of well-wishers would soon be thronging through his room. He pleaded with the doctors for release, plotted escape. In fact, by now he felt strong enough to see people. They had removed the needles from the battered veins. There were no more transfusions. He could sit up and take liquid nourishment. He had even shaved. His face in the mirror had shocked him. It had the same greenish pallor as the Russian taxi drivers. He resolved that until he left the hospital, he would allow Miss Balisano, his military day nurse, who had offered to do so, to shave him. The mail Belinda brought him included a bill from his wife's lawyer for $5,000, on account. He had agreed to pay her lawyers in the first burst of generosity and relief when he had finally made the decision to get a divorce and realized that with money it was possible to obtain one. A letter from his accountant reminded him that he had to make up his mind about what he wanted to do about the $70,000 that the Internal Revenue Service was demanding from him. They were becoming menacing, his lawyer wrote. Belinda had found the copy of The Three Horizons in his hotel room and had read it. She was favorably impressed by it and brought over large casting books with the photographs of actors and actresses in Hollywood and New York for him to glance through and think about who might play which part. He fingered through the books languidly to please Belinda. She had brought over his checkbook. There were bills to be paid. He had no Blue Cross or health insurance, and the hospital had asked her discreetly for an advance. She had made out a check for $1,000. Obediently, he signed it. He signed checks for office rent, telephone and telegraph bills, the diners club, the air travel card. Dead or alive, he must maintain his credit rating. He hoped Anne's psychology professor would never see his signature. Now that he was back in business, Belinda said, she had brought over the scripts of 2 plays by prominent authors that had come into the office in the last week. She had read them and hadn't thought much of them, but the prominent authors would expect a personal note from him. She would bring her pad the next day, prepared to take dictation. He promised to read the plays by the prominent authors. She admired the flowers that the Murphys and the Thomases and Walt Klein had sent, all lavish displays from the most expensive florist on Fifth Avenue. She was shocked when he said, "They make me feel as though I'm on my own bier. Send them down to the children's ward." She warned him darkly about Miss Balisano. The woman was callous, she said, and at the same time maniacally overprotective. She practically had to fight her way with physical force to get into his room each time she came. Fanatical overprotectiveness was dangerous. It was negative thinking. He promised to indulge in no negative thinking, to consider replacing Miss Balisano. Miss Balisano came in at this point, and Belinda said, "I see my time is up," her tone suggesting that she had been struck across the face with a weapon. She left, and for the first time since Craig had met Miss Balisano, he was glad to see her. Miss Balisano took one look at the manuscripts and casting books piled on his bedside table and picked them up and put them on the floor out of sight. She had learned something in Korea. He was lying in his bed with a thermometer in his mouth when Anne came in. It was a gray day, almost evening, and the room was dark. Anne opened the door tentatively, as though ready to flee at the first word from him. He waved a dumb greeting to her, indicating the tube in his mouth. She smiled uncertainly, came over to the bed, leaned over, and gave him a nervous little peck on the forehead. He reached out his hand and held hers. "Oh, Daddy," she said. She wept softly. Miss Balisano came in, turned on the light, took the thermometer, made a notation on his chart. She always refused to tell him what his temperature was. "This is my daughter, Miss Balisano," Craig said. "We've met," Miss Balisano said grimly. But then she said everything grimly. She took no notice of the girl's tears. She fussed with his pillows, said, "Good night, sleep well, don't be long, miss." She marched out, the sound of guns over the horizon. The night nurse would be in soon. The night nurse was a Puerto Rican young man who was a student at City College. He sat in a corner of the room all night reading textbooks in the glow of a carefully shaded lamp. His only duty was to call the intern on the floor if he thought Craig was dying. So far, he had not called the intern. "Oh, Daddy," Anne said, her voice trembling, "I hate seeing you like this." He had to smile a little at the youthful egotism of her first words to him. I. "It's not my fault, is it, Daddy?" she said. "Of course not. If it's too much trouble to talk, don't talk." "I can talk," he said irritably. He was irritated with his illness, not with Anne. But he could see that she thought his temper was directed at her. "We came as soon as Ian got Mr. Thomas's cable," Anne said. "We were in London." Craig wondered from whom Wadley had borrowed the money for the voyage, but he didn't ask the question. "It was good of you to come," was all he said. "You're going to be all right, aren't you?" Anne asked anxiously. Her face was pale. Traveling didn't agree with her. He remembered all the times he had had to stop the car on trips when she was young and prone to car sickness. "Certainly I'm going to be all right," he said. "I talked to Dr. Gibson yesterday. I came right to the hospital as soon as we got in. They said I should wait a day to see you, but Dr. Gibson wouldn't say yes or no when I asked him about you. Only time will tell," he said. "I hate doctors." "He's very good," Craig said. He felt a great affection for Dr. Gibson, quiet, efficient, modest, life-saving man. He just doesn't like being asked to be a prophet. "Well," she said childishly, "he might at least try to be a little bit encouraging." "I guess he doesn't think that's his business," Craig said. "You mustn't try to be too stoical," Anne said. "Ian says that that's what you are, stoical." She was already quoting her lover, Craig noted. "He says it's an unprofitable attitude in this day and age." "Will you pour a glass of water for me, please, darling?" Craig said. He wanted no more quotations from the accumulated wisdom of Ian Wadley. He wasn't really thirsty, but Anne seemed embarrassed and uneasy with him, and asking for a small service from her, even one as minute as pouring water out of a thermos, might make a dent in the painful barrier between them. He saw that the darling had pleased her. He sipped a little from the glass she offered him. "You're going to have more visitors," she said. "Mummy's arriving tomorrow, and—" "Oh, God," Craig said. How does she know? I called her, Anne said defensively. She was terribly upset. You don't mind that I told her, do you? No, he said, lying. It's only human, Anne said. I agree, Craig said impatiently. I agree. It's only human. Gail is on her way too, Anne said. You called her too? Yes. I only did what I thought was right, Daddy. You're not angry at me, are you? No. Craig put the water tumbler down and lay back resignedly, closing his eyes to show Anne that he was tired and wished to be alone. I have something to apologize to you about, Anne said. In my letter, I was too much in a hurry to say anything about your script. I don't know whether it means anything to you or not, but I love it, and I should have told you. You had other things on your mind, he said. I suppose you have a right to be sarcastic with me, Anne said humbly. But anyway, I love it. So does Ian. He wanted me to tell you. Good. He's talked to Mr. Thomas already. He and Mr. Thomas agree on a lot of things about the script. They're both wildly hopeful. Good, Craig said again. Of course, Mr. Thomas doesn't know anything about me yet, she said. She hesitated. Ian is afraid that because of me you're going to be against him. About working on the script, I mean. She waited for Craig to speak, but he kept silent. I told Ian you're too big a man to stand in his way just because... She trailed off. I'm not quite as big a man as I was last week, Craig said. Ian needs the job badly, Anne said. It'll get him off the ground, he says. He's been having such a bad time. You're not going to say no, are you, Daddy? She was imploring now. No, he said, I'm not going to say no. I knew it, she said. She was his happy little daughter now, being promised a treat, oblivious of the world of hospitals, pain, blood. Ian's downstairs, she said. He'd love to come up and say hello. He's terribly worried about you. Can I tell him to come up just for a minute? Tell Ian to go fuck himself, Craig said. Anne took in her breath sharply. It was the first time, as far as he could remember, that he had ever said the word in front of her. Oh, Daddy, she said, how can you be so unjust? She turned and ran out of the room. She's a big girl now, Craig thought as he sank deeper into the pillows. She knows all the words. I'm going to move into a public ward where they don't allow visitors. They operated on him that night. There was no enormous hemorrhage like the night in the hotel, but the tests had shown that he had begun to bleed again, a slow, steady seeping away in his gut whose source they couldn't locate, dangerous and life-sapping. Before he was given the preoperative shot of morphine, while they were shaving his chest and abdomen, he realized that he wasn't afraid. 50-50, the doctor had said. A man couldn't ask for fairer odds. Faces came and went briefly, silently, seen obscurely through haze. Murphy, Thomas, Dr. Gibson, non-committal, no warnings or encouragement. His wife, his daughter Marcia, grotesquely plump and weeping. Gail McKinnon, sea-fresh. Constance, almost unrecognizably stern. Edward Brenner. But Edward Brenner was dead. Were they all a dream? He spoke only once. Marcia, he said, you're a good size. He was in great pain, but he kept from groaning. The African with tribal scars in first class would not understand. The white man's burden. He was stoical and waited for the morphine every 4 hours without asking for more. Who had said that stoicism was an unprofitable attitude? No friend of his. The stagehands in white brought on the props, the syringes, the blood. The lighting stage center was rearranged. There was the sound of surf in his ears. He woke, he slept. The faces came and went with their several claims. Where was Ian Wadley, that loose, deceitful man? Belinda Ewan in electric blue. What checks did she have for him to sign? Other doctors, the best man in the country, soft medical voices, whisperings off stage. The Scandinavian blonde with the expert hands did not reappear, alas. How many days ago had he left Merag? What drink had he ordered on the terrace of the little restaurant overlooking the harbor of Cassis? What had that girl said about her mother? He could sit up in bed and even eat a little, but the fever persisted. In the morning it was around 101. In the evening it went up to 103.5. The plastic bag hung on a stand above his head, dripping antibiotics into his veins day and night. Either the fever or the antibiotics, or both, kept him in a heavy-lidded daze, and he began to lose track of time and not remember how long he had been there. Nobody mentioned it, not he nor any of the doctors, but he knew that they were afraid that he had picked up one of those new hospital-bred wild strains of bacteria for which no treatment had yet been found. Dr. Gibson had forbidden any visitors, and he was grateful for that. Dr. Gibson had told him that when he had been free of fever for 3 whole days, he would be discharged. In the meanwhile, he sleepily watched the television set that had been wheeled into his room and placed at the foot of his bed. Mostly, he just watched the baseball games. It gave him pleasure to watch young men running swiftly across green grass in the sunshine, clearly winning and distinctly losing. He remembered having read about the condemned murderer in Massachusetts, who also had watched the baseball games on television in his cell, and whose only regret was that he would never know whether or not the Dodgers had won the pennant. He wondered if he would know who won the pennant this year. Finally, Murphy convinced Dr. Gibson that he had to see Craig. Craig had had 2 good days. The fever had gone down to 99 in the morning and 102 at night. Miss Balisano still refused to tell him what his temperature was, but Dr. Gibson was more lenient. Murphy's face, when he saw Craig, told him as accurately as any mirror how bad it was. He hadn't looked in a mirror since the operation. "I had to see you, Jess," Murphy said. "I have to leave for the coast tomorrow. Things are piling up, and I just have to be there." "Sure, Murph," Craig said. His voice sounded thin and old in his ears. 3 weeks in New York is all I can manage," Murphy said. "Is that how long I've been here?" Craig asked. Murphy looked at him queerly. "Yes," he said. "A long time," Craig said. "Yes, and the doctors won't give me an estimate about when you'll get out." "They don't know." "Gibson tells me you won't be able to work at anything for at least 6 months, even if you get out tomorrow." "I know," Craig said. "He told me." "Thomas can't wait," Murphy said. "He's got to start shooting in a month if he wants to do it this year. For the weather." "For the weather," Craig nodded. "He and Wadley have been working 18 hours a day. Thomas says Wadley is really panning out. He says you'll be crazy about the final script." "I'm sure." "Do you want me to tell you about who they've got to play it?" "Not really, Murph." Again, Murphy looked at him queerly. "Well, don't worry about the money," he said. "You've got a big chunk up front and 5% of the profits." "Tell me some other time," Craig said. "Thomas has been a real gent about everything." "I'm sure." Craig closed his eyes. Murphy seemed to be far away at the other end of a long hall, and it disturbed him. "You're tired," Murphy said. "I won't bother you any more. Just call me if you need anything." "I'll do just that." Craig didn't open his eyes. "Sonia sends her love." "Thanks, Murph." "Take it easy, kid." Murphy went softly out of the room as Miss Balisano came in. "Turn on the television, please," Craig said. When he heard the noise of the crowd, Craig opened his eyes. It was sunny in St. Louis. On the day that his temperature was normal for the first time, Dr. Gibson allowed his wife to visit him. As far as he knew, Dr. Gibson hadn't been told that they were in the process of getting a divorce, so it was natural for him to let her in. Dr. Gibson hadn't warned Craig that his wife was coming to see him. He probably thought it would be a salutary surprise. Penelope was smiling tremulously as she came into the room. She had had her hair done, and it hung youthfully down to her shoulders. She was wearing a navy blue dress. He had once said that it was the color he liked best on her, a long time ago. "Hello, Jess," she said. Her voice was soft, shaky, her face drawn. The last time they had met, it had been in a lawyer's office. He couldn't remember how many months ago. She bent over and kissed his cheek, the 10,000th kiss. "Hello, Penny," he said. "How's the web going?" It was an old joke between them. "What?" she asked, frowning. "What web?" "Never mind," he said. She had forgotten. "How do you feel?" "Fine," he said. "Can't you tell?" He thought about her lawyers to keep from thinking about her. He saw her lips set, then soften. He knew she was trying to restrain her anger. "Dr. Gibson says there are encouraging signs, very encouraging." "I'm very encouraged," he said. "You don't change, do you?" she said. Anger had momentarily gotten the better of her.